B is for bold. He embodies it.
Slap me around and call me Susan.
B is for brave.
Save yourself.
I'll never forget you, my love.
He exemplifies it. B is for butt. He kicks it.
Well?
Damon Wayans.
Thank you, Blankman.
Blankman. Rated PG-13. At theaters August 19th.
Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 1994 comedy Blankman. Now, Blankman, at its heart, at its core, is a comic book film. It's not just a comedy, it's a comic book movie. It is a straight-up comic book film. And it's a loving send-up and satire of the 60s Batman TV series starring Adam West. And you would not know that if you looked at the advertising for this film or the poster or anything like that. But it absolutely is. If you were a fan of that show, watch Blankman. Check it out if you haven't already. You're going to get a kick out of it because it really is, like I said, it's a loving send-up of that show. There's even footage from the show in the movie, in the beginning of the film. In a sequence from Daryl, Damon Wayans' character's childhood. And the opening credits is a recreation of the opening credits sequence from the show, right down to the same animation style and the same beats. Blankman himself has a utility belt with all these different wacky, weird, and wild gadgets. He puts blank in front of everything like Batman did. So he's got the blank station, the blank car, and so on and so forth. The blank suit. There are also the thwap and the wham and the bam and all these different other sound effects that show up on the screen, just like in the show. And there's some really nice gags that they do with that in the film that I don't want to give away because honestly, I really do recommend this one. I think it's a fun movie. Blankman's a fun flick that is unfairly overlooked. I would say it is not as good as I remember it being. I do have more issues with it now than I did in the past, but it's still a really fun, entertaining movie. And it's honestly a film that was ahead of its time. You look at something like Kick-Ass, and Blankman predated Kick-Ass, the comic and the movie, by multiple years. So maybe Mark Millar needs to give Blankman a little bit of the credit, for what he did with Kick-Ass. It's the same sort of thing. Blankman is a nerd who finds a way to become a superhero, decides he wants to be a superhero and clean up the streets, just like Kick-Ass does. In a lot of ways, it's the precursor to Kick-Ass. And I definitely think that's something that is not really mentioned that much. This movie has kind of been forgotten about. It's not a film that you really hear that much about. It doesn't help either that it's not on Blu-ray. It's not really streaming anywhere. I mean, I think you can stream it on YouTube and stuff if you pay for it or rent it. But it's one of those movies that fell by the wayside. It's kind of been forgotten about. I mean, The Meteor Man has more of a cult following than Blankman does. And I would say The Meteor Man is a better film, but I would say Blankman is better when it comes to the entertainment factor. Like, Blankman's a film that I could watch and put on in the background and get some fun with it. It's also a movie I could watch pretty much any time and enjoy it because there's a lot of things to like about the film. But yeah, it's definitely a satire of the 60s Batman show. I mean, Blankman and his sidekick, Other Guy, they even get in a scenario near the end of the movie that's straight out of the Batman TV show. So, it's one of those things that if you've seen that show, if you're familiar with that show, I definitely think you will enjoy Blankman. Even if you aren't really that familiar with it, I still think you'll have some fun with this movie. Blankman is directed by Mike Binder, who before this didn't really do that much like this film at all, and didn't really do anything like this movie afterwards either. And I gotta be honest, he was way out of his comfort zone here, and it didn't really look like it. I thought he did a good job here. It had some dynamic direction, it had a nice, fun vibe to it. It didn't seem like he was really a director that was miscast or was given the reins to a film that he wasn't ready for. So Mike Binder, it's kind of too bad that he didn't do anything else like Blankman after he directed this movie. It's written by Damon Wayans and J.F. Lawton, and you can definitely see the inspiration that Damon Wayans had for this character, not only from the 60s Batman show, which I think Damon Wayans was a big fan of, but also his own character from In Living Color, Handyman. There's a lot of different similarities between Daryl, Blankman, and Handyman in Living Color. Which makes me think, like, was this meant to be a Handyman movie? But then they realized that wouldn't go over well because Handyman's a handicapped superhero, and they'd be like, that could be considered offensive to some people. So we'll make it something else. We'll call it Blankman. Now the script, it is solid. It has some really fun, hilarious lines of dialogue in it. Shithead man. Hey Commissioner, Shithead man is here to see you. And other bits like the moment when David Alan Grier thinks he's got a date with Kimberly, Robin Givens' character, but he ruins it unbeknownst to him because he's just talking to his brother Daryl through a communicator in his belt buckle, and he doesn't know that it looks like he's talking to his penis. And then Kimberly shows up, and she's been watching him this whole time, awkwardly talking down to his penis and saying things like, "No, not right now." And then David Alan Grier's reaction is priceless when she pretty much turns him down because she thinks that he was talking to his dick the whole time. Of course the standout gag when Daryl dresses up as Blankman for the first time and decides to fight some crime, and he encounters this pimp who's like beating one of his tricks. So he's beating one of his girls, and Blankman tries to stop him. And and I love the guy. He's like, "Don't make me hurt you, get out of here." And Blankman's all like, "Let her go," and he's like, "Why don't you slap me silly and call me Susan?" And then he just bitch smacks Blankman around, and he just goes bam, and the girly yell that Damon Wayans gives is hilarious. "I warned you, Susan!" Ah! just fucking smacking his ass around. Oh man, that was funny. So the film definitely does have its it does have a multitude of funny gags in it. I definitely think the humor is where the film has the majority of its strong suits in terms of its script. But also I felt the characters were likable. It did have some grit to it, despite the fact that it was PG-13. And part of me wonders if it might have been even better if it was R. Like if you had more, you could be edgier, you could be more over the top. It definitely would have helped the villains have more of an impact. But I think Jon Polito as your main bad guy would have been an issue regardless. It doesn't help either where they do this running gag about is he gay or not, which apparently Jon Polito was gay in real life. But it's one of those things where that doesn't really work very well for your villain. I know it's a comedy, but The Meteor Man is labeled as a comedy, and Simon Kane is intimidating. Even though, when he's overacting and he's like, "I have all the power," it's not as intimidating, but he still had a presence to him. And the Golden Lords were a lot more flashy and cool than Jon Polito's Manelli and his henchmen. who really weren't much of anything. Jason Alexander's character, Mr. Larry Stone, who is the boss for Kimberly and Kevin in this TV news station, he was a better villain than Jon Polito. You should have just had him be the villain. But yeah, it's one of those things. Then you have like a corrupt mayor played by Christopher Lawford, who doesn't really add that much to the film either. So it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, the script definitely could have done a better job with the villains, the adversaries that Damon Wayans and Alan Grier have to face. I would also have to say the gadgets that Blankman has are really cool, but it would have been nice to have seen him use them more, and it would have been nice to have more scenes of him crime fighting. It seems like there were a few scenes here and there. He stops a stick up, he does a few things, comically helps a girl save her dog, but there wasn't really a lot that was like, oh man, like everybody loves this. He helped a woman give birth to her kid in a elevator because she was trapped in an elevator, and that made it so Blankman had to see her thingy. And he helped her, but it's one of those things where I don't know. He became this phenomenon, and it didn't really feel like it was warranted. It's like he stopped. He did a few things, but it didn't feel like it was something that was like would be all over the news. I think they could have done a better job with that to make his exploits seem to be a lot more larger than life. Now, another thing that I really like about the film, though, and I thought the script did a good job with as well, is the chemistry between the characters of Daryl, Blankman, and Kimberly Johns, played by Robin Givens. I thought Robin and Damon had great chemistry with one another. They were a sweet couple, and I mean, Robin Givens in this is jaw-droppingly gorgeous. Like, she is at the peak of her hotness in this movie. And I also thought that she did a good job performance-wise. I love the look of Blankman's Blank Station. It's this childish, kiddie production design. It really suited Daryl Walker's character really well. And I like the creativity behind the gadgets and things like that. He has a stink bomb that's made out of his brother's farts that he collected when his brother was asleep. It's there's some childish stuff, but it's clever though. It's clever. It's funny. J5, that the whole thing near the end with J5 and the demise of J5 and how Damon Wayans reacts to it over dramatically is quite funny, is pretty witty. There's just a lot of fun moments and lines and sequences in this film. But where I think the script definitely and the story could have used some improvement is there were moments where it just felt like it was going through the motions. Like when it was trying to do the whole thing where Blankman feels bad for what happened with the mayor and the bank and all of that, and he let the people down and they don't like him anymore, so he retires and he goes to work for McDonald's and he gives up being a hero. Like, that was just stock, generic storytelling that I honestly think they could have done something different with that instead of what they did. The film really lost me then at that moment, and then it just made and then the climax was fun, but I don't know, it could have been more explosive. I mean, in the middle of the movie, they had like a giant explosion that other guy and Blankman escaped from when the bank exploded, but then the climax is nowhere near as large in comparison. So it's one of those things, maybe they blew their wad too early and should have waited for that kind of thing until the climax. And the character of Daryl Walker and Blankman, he's good in small doses, but there are times where you get an overdose of this character and it's just annoying. He really is irritating. I think it's Damon Wayans' different quirks that he's doing with this character. It's just very irritating. So that's another thing. I mean, when your hero is irritating and annoying, that can get kind of old, for sure. But like I said, Jon Polito, weak villain, doesn't really add that much to the film. It honestly, it's very disappointing, and that hurts the pacing too, because like you know, every good hero needs a good villain, and even if it's a comedy, you still need a good villain. Even the '60s Batman show, if the villain was weak, the episode was weak. So the villain is weak here, so it's a weak episode. Like, it's a weak. It's not a weak film. It's just one of those things where it's weaker than it needs to be because of the lack of a truly good adversary, a good villain. Cinematography, it's there by Newton Thomas Siegel, as is the editing by Adam Weiss. The music, I don't really remember a lot from the score. Unlike the Meteor Man, which has an excellent score, this score really isn't really all that. It isn't that great, but it's not used that much. The majority of the music is from the soundtrack, and it's a really nice soundtrack. There are quite a few tracks that I really like from this soundtrack. There are some that aren't that great, but I really have a lot of fun with the energetic Here He Comes hip-hop rap by G Wiz. But I would have to say my favorite song from the soundtrack is Superhero by the New Power Generation. And that played at the end credits, it played early in the film, it played multiple different times in the movie. And it's such a upbeat, energetic, just fun song that really fit the film like a glove. So, yeah. And once again, I definitely just have to give credit to the writers for coming up with this character, Blankman. This is more of a realistic superhero movie. I mean, if you're going to see somebody try to dress up and be a hero, they're more than likely going to look something like that, okay? Some guy in his underwear. And I like the fact that it's bulletproof underwear, and there's a whole gag in one scene where the bad guys shoot Blankman, and then he's like, he gets back up, and they're like, oh wow, and then there's other people who are like, shoot him in the head, and of course it's like Blankman's like, no. So yeah, Blankman, he's the hero, but like he's kind of useless. He can use the gadgets and stuff, and he's good for that, but when it comes to fighting, he's terrible. And so that there's some nice bits of humor that come in with that. David Alan Grier's character, Kevin, he's the better fighter. He knows karate, so he always comes in and picks up most of the slack when it comes to the fighting. And I thought the fight choreography was pretty good with Kevin, with the other guy, and that leads to a really funny scene when in the climax. When Blankman and other guy are trying to take down Manelli in his hideout, and Blankman actually does a karate kick and actually successfully connects, and Blankman pauses for a second. He's like, "Did I do that? Was that me?" So yeah. It's a comedy at heart. I would say, actually, no, it's a comic book film at heart, but it's also a comedy. And it succeeds when it comes to the comedy elements, but the comic book elements, when it comes to being a satire of the Batman show from the 60s, it excels at that. But when it comes to being a comic book movie with, like, action and fun, fun, it's still really fun, but when it comes to action, it's not really that good. It's definitely below average in that regard. Although it does have some moments, but it's not really the best action movie. I would say there are definitely other films from this time period that did a better job in terms of the action. But the film, it cost about $3 million, and it made like $7 million in the box office. So it wasn't a bomb, but it wasn't really a big hit. Critics were not fond of this film. It got a lot of negative reviews. I don't think it's as bad as some of the critics say it is, but that's just me personally. And also, at the end of the day, I really like the message this film has. There's a great scene where Damon Wayans, I thought, delivered a good performance in this scene where he's with Robin Givens, with Kimberly, and she's interviewing Blankman in his blank station. And she's talking to him about why he became a hero and all of this and who is Blankman. And I thought the line delivery here was on point by Damon Wayans, and I also felt that the writing here was really good because this is the core message of the film. And I liked how Daryl says this. He says something similar to this. I don't know the exact quote, but something similar to this. Blankman is every person who sees a crime happening outside of their window and decides to get out and do something about it. That's a hero. That's a hero through and through. So despite all the gags and all the silliness and all the goofs and all that stuff in this movie, it does have a really good message of standing up and doing something. Standing up and fighting not only for yourself, but for those around you and doing what's right. So, yeah, in a lot of ways you could say Blankman is more of an inspiring hero than some heroes that you see on the screen today. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Blankman, except I would say check it out if it interests you. If the trailer looks like fun, definitely give it a watch. And like I said, if you're a fan of the 60s Batman show, it's definitely worth a look. And overall, I would say this is one of Damon Wayans' better films that he starred in. You definitely could have started off on a worse foot. You know, he could have started off in a really bad way. But he didn't do that. He left In the Living Color to do Blankman, and I think it was a good choice. It was a good fit for him and for his style of comedy. And it could have been better, but it also could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot worse. So overall, it's a fun, entertaining movie that definitely has some flaws, but it's not a total blank at all. It doesn't just shoot blanks. It definitely hits on more than one occasion. So anyway, thanks for watching. And I guess I don't really know what to say about the film, except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, I would give Blankman 3.5 out of 5. It's an above average movie, but it's entertaining. It's an entertaining above average film that has a good likable cast with good performances, weak villain, weak action, and a lead who can get on your nerves after a bit. But it's got a good concept. It's got his heart in the right place, and it goes by at a decent enough pace, even though at times it can kind of be a little bit slow. But overall, yeah, it's a fun movie, and that's one of the best ways to put it. It's a fun movie. It really is. So anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.